Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wrestling Royalty. Welcome to Gimme a Hug. Yeah, we are here tonight to be talking about the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2024. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I hope you'll bear with us today. And we're going to call this a Sunday social discussion because on a Friday, we'll bring you Friday features. Tonight, though, however, we are 2 days on. Life has got in the way. Life has been busy, but we don't want to miss our weekly appointment with you. So we thought it would be a great chance to have a little bit of a chill out session on a Sunday. And just basically have a chat about the individuals that are going into the WWE Hall of Fame this year in Philadelphia. So I'm going to bring in Sam. I will pre-warn you, there was a reason why SmackDown wasn't on this week on Gimme a Hug. Yeah, Sam is a little bit laid low with a bit of flu. He's feeling a bit better tonight, so he did want to join us. Of course, we will try and make sure he does keep his voice and doesn't go on too many long dialogues and things like that, but we will hopefully have a good chat. We might even be joined by a couple of the other lads from Gimme a Hug as well. I think Dan might be popping his head in at some point, and you never know, we might even see some of the more elusive characters of Gimme a Hug. But one man who is not shy of the camera, one man who is not shy of some hard work is Mr. Sam Smith himself. Let me bring him in without any further ado. Mr. Sam Smith, how are you doing, sir? How are you feeling? Let me just cut you off for a second because your audio is quite frankly terrible. I can barely hear you. You sound like you're in a little box.
How about now?
That is infinitely better.
Oh, good. Okay, in that case, I'll keep it here. I'll keep it on like this. I think what it is when I'm banging that, it'd be good if I could just use the computer's audio and not this, because this seems quite sensitive. But there we are. Sorry. But I never know until I'm actually on, which is frustrating. But yeah, I'm all right. I felt a bit poorly on Friday. Like I was planning on doing SmackDown, but it got to about 11 o'clock. I'm frustrated as well because it would have been an early stream with it with the daylight savings in America.
That's right. So yeah.
I'm a bit wound up that I didn't get to do it, but it got to about 11 o'clock, and I thought I don't want to gross everybody out, but my throat, my nose was not playing up. And I thought people aren't going to want to watch me blow my nose for 2 hours, and that's what they're about to get. So it was needs must, unfortunately. And luckily, I'm a bit better now. But yeah, Hall of Fame, I haven't got a huge amount to say at the moment. I'm a little bit underwhelmed, but apart from Paul Heyman, of course, but we'll get there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason why I want to do this, because I've heard it a few times where people maybe are a little bit unsure about some of the entrants this year, who they are, and it's not that they're not worthy of going in, but let's face it, there is a lot of wrestling in the world. There is a lot of history in wrestling as well. So it stands to reason that some people, you might have heard their name, but you don't know where they've come from. And sometimes you might not even understand that this person might be heavily influenced or seen or has heavily influenced someone else that we are kind of savvy with and au fait with. So we're going to go through a few things like that because it is quite an interesting class this year, because I was expecting maybe a couple more people. I was expecting maybe a couple of people linked to ECW. And of course, we've got Paul Heyman, but I thought we might have seen a couple of extra ones as well. But it doesn't seem that way. This obviously needs to have a sort of disclaimer up top. There may well be more people added between now and Philadelphia. I can't promise there won't be, but things have definitely slowed down in terms of announcements. They seem to have that sort of burst of 2, 3, and then a couple more join later on. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a chat about each of the people that are going in this year, what their sort of background is, maybe a couple of facts that you didn't know about them. We'll have more of a discussion around Paul Heyman, our favourite moments. And to start things off, we're going to have a bit of a chat about the Hall of Fame in general, because I'm always keen to hear wrestling fans' opinions, because the Hall of Fame, I guess, is very subjective as to who should go in. So, Sam, the first question I'm going to ask you tonight is, what are you a fan of the Hall of Fame? Do you feel like it should be more? Do you think it is prestigious enough? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm a smart, so I know a smart mark. So I know that a lot of it is over the years has been dictated to by Vince, he who shall not be named, but I just did. So I've often rolled my eyes at it, but I also watch it quite religiously, and I enjoy it when people who deserve to go in. And then I fast forward and other entries like JBL, who had traffic. And then there's there's a lot of people who go in that aren't from my era. There's some of them I appreciate. And then there's some I'm happy to learn about. And, so I don't know. It's a mixed bag for me. I was, we were there, weren't we? In person last year. And it went on a little bit. And I don't know if it would benefit from being a separate thing and not jet lag was it for me. Apologies for the comment I made a moment ago about thingy, but I'm just not a fan of that division, and I'll say that that's not. But
anyway. Sorry, I'm just getting some a message just saying your mic is quite grainy at the moment. We're hearing like a bit of sort of static in the background, but I got the message. For me, I will add to that as well that I kind of feel like there should be a physical Hall of Fame by now. There's a lot of people who have gone in, a lot of worthy, a lot of people who maybe are political, and things like that. But to me, I think there should be some sort of location, whether it's in Florida, where obviously you've got the NXT and Capital Wrestling Center, the Performance Center, etc., whatever you want to kind of call it. You've obviously got that kind of area. Or maybe you do it up in Stamford, Connecticut, where the headquarters are. But to me, I feel like there is scope to have a physical Hall of Fame and have little sections for each person who's gone in and things like that. So let me know if that's something that you'd like to see in the comments. Obviously, we're keen to hear your thoughts on Hall of Fame and who's going in this year as well. But certainly for me, it needs something physical because they do the I can't remember. They call it WWE World this year. Previously, it's been Access, and you have the kind of the different things where you can go around the exhibits and see their like ring gear and like some cool photos or like a statue, etc. But for me, I think it's a missed trick, and it's very strange for WWE not to do that because it's not like they would be having to pay out loads of money if they did it in Stamford. I can't imagine the rental prices or the property price would be too bad, but yeah. Sam, how's your audio doing? Are we back up and running there?
You tell me. I'm sorry. I'll tell you what. Is that better?
Crystal clear.
Right. Do you know what it is? It's the microphone on the headphones. What I've done is I've turned that off, and I'm just using the computer. It's what it is for some reason. This computer, this is Jess's rather awesome gaming computer. This one uses, for some reason, is obsessed with using my headphones, where my Mac, what I used to use, defaults to the computer one. The only thing is this has got a way better image, way better camera on it. This one's, that's why I use it, and it's bigger.
Cool. Well, we're back in business anyway. So with that in mind, let's crack on and see who we're going to be talking about first. So the US Express is a tag team, and it does seem to be there's at least one tag team that will go in each year of the Hall of Fame. And to me, slightly surprising, US Express was the tag team that was picked for this one. I thought there might have been a couple of other ones that were kind of there, and this one leads into something we'll talk about at the end of the show as well. But I thought before we go into Sam's thoughts on the US Express going in, I'll give you a little bit of a background as to who they actually are. Now, the US Express is Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham, names or last names at least that you might be a little bit familiar with when it comes to wrestling lineage. Of course, very sadly, Bray Wyatt is intangibly linked to those names because he is, in fact, Windham Rotunda, a combination of both their last names. So these guys are brothers-in-law, and we have Mike Rotunda on the right-hand side, who you might know from his time in IRS, that sort of faction, that team. But yeah, very sad that Bray won't be there to be able to see his uncle and his dad be inducted. And we'll go into a little bit more about Bray Wyatt at the end of this. But US Express were actually at the first WrestleMania. They were the tag team champions going in. They ended up losing their tag team championships at the first WrestleMania. Sam, for a bonus point, do you know who they lost their tag team titles to?
I don't know.
Just putting you on the spot there, by the way. I feel quite bad.
Not a sniff.
They lost their titles to the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov at WrestleMania 1. So there wasn't just the main event WrestleMania at WrestleMania 1. There was another tag team there. But these guys were basically, because they're US Express, they were very Americana. They were baby faces. The crowd loved them. And then obviously they kind of split their own ways. It wasn't a very long run as a tag team in WWE at all. But yeah, basically the kind of long and short of it is they are real life brothers-in-law, and their legacy's continued. They've got Bo Dallas, obviously, that's been in it, and Bray Wyatt, as we've discussed already. And they used to come into the arena. They're probably their most well-known theme was they used to come into Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. So as you can imagine, these guys were sort of very big with the crowd. And a bit of trivia for you. When they came into WWE, or they came back to WWE as a tag team, they actually came out to Rick Derringer's Real American, which you might understand is Hulk Hogan's theme tune, but these guys had it first.
Oh, right. Wow. I didn't know. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, so there's a bit of trivia for you. Hulk Hogan's theme tune that he's most well known for used to be the US Express. Who's the other one that's like that? Randy Orton used to have CM Punks, didn't he?
Oh, did he really? Cult of Personality?
No, the one before that.
Oh, I was going to say, because that suits Punk way more than Randy.
I think it's that way around. But yeah, he came out to it, I think, like once or twice, and then they swapped it, and Punk ended up getting it. So
surprise! I was going to say, I was listening to Mercedes Monet's new theme tune earlier today. Well, over the weekend, and I thought, where have I heard that music before? And it's Volta, Gunther's old previous theme tune. I forgot that piece of classical music. Not Beethoven's Fifth. It's the other one. And I was like, where have I heard? Dun 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 dun. Dun. She has that, but sped up. So there you go. There's another one where it a theme tune's been synonymous with one wrestler and then gone to another one. Obviously, it's remixed and someone's screaming the word CEO over it. But other than
that, So it does happen from time to time. But this is probably one of the lesser known version or known ones that they had, and obviously went on to be huge as these sort of. I guess that they will get it right because they know when a music fits someone a lot more than someone else. Danny's just fact checked there for me. Kill Switch Engage, My Curse was the one. I don't remember it being called My Curse. I thought it was a different Kill Switch Engage song, but anyway, Kill Switch Engage used to be Randy Orton, moved on. The US Express, big tag team back in the 80s, really over with the American crowd, and as I say, in my opinion, very short-lived. It was really nice to see that the WWE released that video of Triple H telling the guys that they were going to be inducted in. They looked very emotional, and again, we will discuss it why that might have been. But this has obviously been very emotional last few months for the family, this family in particular. So it's a great touch for those guys to be going in, and really nice to just see that moment of them going in. So I'm sure they'll be present. It'd be interesting to see who it is who's going to induct them. I'm sure there's a few people from back in the 80s who'd be more than willing to do so. But it'd be interesting again because there's a few, when we go through the facts, who's going to do that kind of stuff for each of the entrants and whether they're going to be there or not. So we'll go through that when we get to each of them. There's a picture of them at WrestleMania 1 in Madison Square Gardens, defending their tag team titles, or not defending it anyway. So, apologies, very grainy, but as you can imagine, the photo quality wasn't very good.
It's Mania 1. What do you want? You're not going to get 4K on that. Like, you can enhance that bad boy all you like. There's only so much you can do there. So there, anyway.
Big fan. You can tell it's the 80s straight away just because of the mullets.
Yes.
And the short, trunks as well.
I feel like I'm seeing Bray Wyatt in a parallel world, almost with those pictures. You know what I mean?
It is weird that you can kind of take both their faces, put them together, and you can see Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas.
Yeah.
So
it's the eyes. He's got his dad's eyes, 100%.
Yeah, I feel like he's got his like uncle's rest of his features though. Like there's
he's frame.
Danny's come up with a bit of a shout. He thinks Bo Dallas might be the one to induct them. Quite possibly. It depends what kind of route they go for, because obviously he would be very intangibly linked because of his family, but would he be the best person suited for talking about what they were like back in the day? Because when you hear them, these stories, they very much talk about, oh, you know, we did this on the road, or they used to be like this, and what it was like in the crowd. And obviously Bo won't have that kind of knowledge, but certainly he can speak from I used to watch them, you know, whenever I got the chance and things like that. So it'd be interesting if they go down the family tie route or if they go elsewhere. I think they'll go elsewhere for that one in particular, because I think Bo would be the likely one to induct Bray should that happen at any point.
Yeah, and also let's not forget there's the interesting wrinkle that you pointed out earlier this week, that the company internally is referring to him, because he's still their employee, but as Taylor Rotunda. And not because normally they go with your wrestler name, your stage name, internally and externally. You know, and staff are supposed to refer to you by your wrestler name, and that's not been happening at the moment. Now, some people have speculated that that's evidence of him being the guy to induct them in the Hall of Fame. Others have speculated it's that if Bo Dallas returns to the ring, they might rebrand him somewhat. Break the fourth wall a little bit and maybe have him come out and say, look, you know, you all knew I was Bray's brother, so we're not going to hide from it anymore. Bo Dallas is gone, but Taylor Rotunda is here. And they could then use that as well to, like, if they wanted to link to the Uncle Howdy stuff and bring that back. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time at the end dedicated to potential Bray induction this year, but we'll get into that. But here we're going to be talking about Thunderbolt Patterson, who is, as we said at the beginning, probably one of the names that maybe a lot of people don't know, but this guy's a bit of a trailblazer. When I was doing my research for talking about it, you obviously want to feel a little bit confident. But Thunderbolt Patterson, real name is Claude Patterson, was, as I say, a trailblazer back in the early 70s, and someone who a lot of people actually look up to and took a lot from the way that he did his promos, his speeches. So he's actually one of the people who stood up and really early doors wanted to have a union. He wanted to unionize wrestlers. So, you know, people like CM Punk, I'm sure, would be somewhat a big advocate of his. But Dusty Rhodes is the name that will always come back in terms of the way he spoke. Apparently, he took a lot of that cadence from Thunderbolt Patterson. He also Thunderbolt Patterson was blacklisted from the NWA for performing at companies that he wasn't supposed to, ones that didn't really fall under the NWA's, like, you know, power, that rule of power that they used to have over the industry back in the day. So yeah, they used to call them outlaw promotions. And that was actually lifted by Dusty Rhodes when Dusty Rhodes got involved, you know, higher up on the NWA. And one of the other things, you know, he kind of like was a trailblazer for, as Dan pointed out, he pushed for better working rights, better working conditions. He complained about institutional racism within the industry as well. But yeah, he's well known for his attempt to form the Wrestlers Labour Union. But again, Dan's kind of keeping me right here. He actually would work with Ollie Anderson as a tag team back in 1984, and they briefly held the tag team championship to the NWA. And then Ollie's kayfabe cousin, a young Arn Anderson, came to the sport. And Ollie said he was tired of carrying guys like Patterson and Dusty Rhodes, broke up with Patterson, joined with Arn Anderson in what would become the foundation for the Four Horsemen. So that was kind of like the big thing that Thunderbolt Patterson was involved in back in the day. So again, very influential in terms of like other storylines going on, but also his sort of like his views and his beliefs were basically part of who he is. So a little bit of a controversial character. He is 82 now, and it should be pointed out that after he retired, because he had complications with diabetes, he's actually amputated. He's had his arms and legs amputated. So it's very unlikely that he'll be there. He obviously could be there, but it's a bit of speculation as to whether he will be in attendance and who might be, because obviously Dusty would have been the one who would probably have inducted him back in the day. I'm not sure they're going to get someone like Arn Anderson in, very heavily linked with a company that, you know, won't do that kind of business. So I'm sure there's still some people back in the day in the 70s, 80s that would be happy to induct him. But again, another one who's quite interesting to see who they might call in to do that job for them. Really excited to see how they talk about him and do the video packages, because the video packages that they do for Hall of Fame, as most of the stuff with WWE, is always fantastic, top notch. Yeah. It's what makes them stand out. But yeah, WWE put themselves, his legacy as a showman, with his signature quick punches, incredible blend of power and speed, and his compassion for his fellow man, live on. His influence can still be seen in the ring today. So basically, yeah, very big trailblazer for many reasons, really. There. Any thoughts on Thunderbolt Patterson? I know you said there's a couple that you weren't too sure of. Is this one of the guys who fits into that title?
Well, I know, obviously, I know who he is, but I'm the most of I can't say I've watched a huge amount of his stuff. Like my era, well, not my era, but the one I've gone back and watched, I suppose, would be after him, when the Four Horsemen began and things like that. Everything before that, in the Territories days, I haven't really explored quite that much. But I know about Thunderbolt mainly from the controversies between some of the things Ole Anderson was alleged to have said to him, and we won't get into that or too deep into that or anything, but that's, I suppose, how I know about him, really. It's just through the controversies of other wrestlers. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him go in. It's interesting timing, then putting him in now after, obviously, with the death of Ole Anderson. A lot of those things were dug up, weren't they? Like if you read some of the obituaries and things like that. Particularly Meltzer's. But yeah, I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about him, I suppose, without that being the main thing I know him for, you know.
Yeah, really interesting one that he's going in as well, because there was a bit of speculation that he might be going in as one of they used to do it more, was the Hall of Fame legacy entrance, where maybe there weren't the kind of big showy names that they would actually have at the ceremony, but they had this sort of undercurrent of legacy names that would go in. So WWE obviously think enough of Thunderbolt Patterson to be able to put him in as a full entrant. So they must have something planned to be able to properly represent him and his legacy within the company and wrestling in general. We'll move on to a name that I'm sure if you're watching this, then you'll have heard of Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay, whatever you want to, throughout his career, but very much as part of the wrestling community. Muhammad Ali, I feel like his presence was felt from WrestleMania 1, and there was a lot of kind of like things that you could kind of tie back. But even who he was and the way he spoke changed the boxing game and lent it. Well, I think he kind of really took a lot of credence from wrestling promos and watching wrestling promos, because he was a big fan of professional wrestling. So when you see him in these press conferences and he's lightning quick wit on the microphone, to me, it's a wrestling promo, and that hadn't really been done too much in boxing, and he really brought that. Mark's in, and again, the real people's champion. He's known as a lot of nicknames, but I think the one everyone knows is the greatest, isn't it? So really, really interesting to see. Mark reckons it's going to be Rock who's going to induct him. Very possibly could be. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would want to put Muhammad Ali in. I believe he's going into the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame. It's not been kind of outright said, but there's obviously a few things that we can go back on. One of the big things, his tie-in with wrestling was his match against Antonio Inoki, which was branded as the War of the Worlds back in 1976. And that was a match that he had in Tokyo, Japan. So, yeah, really kind of like significant event in wrestling history was that match between a boxer and a wrestler. But it showed you the sort of reverence that Muhammad Ali held wrestling in. But his presence was there for the main event of WrestleMania 1. He was a big name to kind of call upon to make it this big celebrity like pop culture phenomenon. So he was, I believe, was he the ringside enforcer or the timekeeper?
Oh, I don't know.
Special guest referee, but I don't think he was actually like referee. He was just kind of like around the outside, and he punched Roddy Piper in the face with his famous jab. So yeah, he very much was kind of involved in WrestleMania 1, and I don't think it took too much persuasion to get him involved as well. So yeah, really interesting to see Muhammad Ali going in, very much deserved. Sometimes with these celebrity ones, we kind of feel like it's a bit of a stretch. People like Donald Trump have gone in the past, and is Snoop Dogg in there already?
I don't know, actually, is he? I know Kid Rock's in there, but anyway.
Yeah, but like, yeah, we'll have a chat about who we want to go in, but like, we might as well do this now. Celebrity-wise, there's someone who I think has been missed out, and I don't want to take away from Muhammad Ali. I personally think Cyndi Lauper should have been in by now. As a celebrity wing, she was absolutely instrumental to bringing people in from the MTV generation in. Heavily involved with David Wolf when it came to WrestleMania 1. She had Captain Lou in her music video for Girls Just Want to Have Fun. He was her dad in that music video. So to me, Cyndi Lauper did a lot to get the sort of wider population's eyes on WWE back in the 80s. So I personally really want to see Cyndi Lauper go in. She's someone who I would love to interview about her involvement in WrestleMania and wrestling in general. She's on my dream list of people who I'd want to interview. So if you ever watch this, I want to interview you, Cyndi. I know
she watches every week, mate. I've heard. I hear on the grapevine. She watches every week. She doesn't watch you. She watches you as well. You and Dan.
But yeah, Dan's saying the same as well. He says that Cyndi Lauper should have been for a good few years as well. But yeah, any thoughts on the greatest going into the Hall of Fame this year?
Yeah, a few. Like when it comes to the Hall of Fame, I confess I tend to zone in. This is why I didn't know Snoop Dogg was in, or at least I'd forgotten, because I don't normally. I just don't care when the celebrities go in. I just don't, unless they've done something really, really cool. I just don't care. I don't mind Kid Rock and Snoop being in there. Obviously, they've done stuff, and Snoop actually did really well last year at WrestleMania when everything went wrong to vamp and to think on his feet and do something. He wins the award for the worst people's elbow of all time, but
I don't know. He got some good hang time.
Well, it was almost so bad it was good, I thought. But when it comes to Muhammad Ali, what's great about Muhammad Ali? And it's like you say, with him cutting promos and things like that. So wrestling borrowed very, very, very heavily from boxing back in the day in terms of how they promoted fights and how they did that. Well, of course, the producers were Jessica Garza, as Mark's saying. But my point is, he did well to not to do that. He still gets the credit regardless of what the producers say.
At the end of the day, he's a rapper. He's not a wrestler. So the fact he still managed to throw like a couple of punches and the people's elbow, like he didn't have to do the people's elbow.
Exactly.
So
he gets every inch of the credit. He gets every inch.
Yeah.
I hold to that. Now, so wrestling borrowed heavily from boxing, and something interesting happened after that. Boxing started borrowing from wrestling as well. For that, because wrestling took a lot of its foundation from boxing when it went from like the Carney shows to the big promoted stuff. It emulated real sports, of course, real combat sports. And today we see something really interesting, which is UFC. Now, if you watch UFC and WWE, you will see UFC fighters who are legitimate fighters, because UFC fans hate it when I point this out. UFC fighters cut promos these days. They don't just talk, they cut promos. They cut wrestling promos on their opponents. And some of them are scripted. Whether you like it or not, they are. So the connecting tissue between like these things almost started out for me with Muhammad Ali when he did that, when he leaned into one industry to benefit another. And so that's why out of all of the celebrity additions, this is one I'm interested in. This is one I'm not going to fast forward this one like I did with Kid Rock or anyone else. Like, this is one I'm actually going to pay attention to, because I think Muhammad Ali gave some legitimacy to wrestling during a time where it needed it to become a bigger deal and for people to become household names and stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, like the UFC, when you spoke about that, is kind of case in point. Muhammad Ali was probably the one who blurs that line between like the sort of MMA, like actual like sort of like the physical contact with professional wrestling as well. But it was very much his love for the industry was the reason why he got involved. And that match is that he had against Inoki is just kind of like held in massive reverence as well. So very, very, very excited to see him go in again. A one that I think they'll it'll be interesting to see how they kind of spin this, because he obviously had some moments they can kind of refer back to in WWE, but a lot of obviously his career is going to be about boxing. So how they kind of, maybe this is one of the shorter ones, but we'll see. But yeah, definitely the Rock's a shout potentially to induct him. A big hero of the Rock's. A big hero for anyone really who's been in any kind of like contact sport and anyone who just like sport in general, really, to be honest. So yeah, very, very happy to see Muhammad Ali going in. I think if there's like a theme this year into the Hall of Fame, it's probably Trailblazers is probably like what they're going to go with, because every single one of the people going in has some sort of claim to being a trailblazer within the industry or the wider sporting industry. And that's certainly true for Bull Nakano, who is the female entrant this year, which they're always, they try and I guess like have a tag team, a singles male legend, a celebrity, and then a women's wrestler go in as well. Now, there has been times where people have said, they're inducting people from that diva era of WWE too early. Have they done as much for the industry as someone like Bull Nakano? But I don't think you can kind of like, as long as they go in at some point and the fans still talk about them, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I would just say it's great to have someone with the sort of legitimacy of Bull Nakano, who very much was a trailblazer back in the early to mid 90s, was when she kind of really made her name. She made her name in All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling when she was a teenager, and then she came across to WWE and had a massive feud with Alundra Blaze back in 1994, and possibly the biggest thing she might be known for is the victory that she had in the Tokyo Dome against Blaze Alundra, where she won the Women's Championship in front of 42,000 fans back in November 1994. So huge. The other thing I think a lot of people might know her for, I've managed to get a picture, is this moment. You'll see this go around on social media every so often, where Bull is on the top of a cage and does a leg drop and just literally bounces back to her feet in one motion. Now I know people are like, Dave Meltzer have said, like, please don't ever do this, don't emulate this, it's ridiculous, you'll take years off your career, because it's a hell of a long way down to do a leg drop onto your coccyx effectively and then bounce back up. But she was very well respected and very much still is. But yeah, this is against I think is it Aja Kong?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
and she's a character in her own right.
Absolutely, yeah. So Bull Nakano was in both WWE or WF as it was then, and WCW for a little bit as well. She did retire back in 2012, and then went on to have a golf career, I believe, as well.
Agreed,
many different talents. As Dan said, Bull Nakano was also one of the women to go to the North Korea show in association with, I think it's New Japan Pro Wrestling rather than AJPW on that one. Yeah. Bull Nakano, Sam, any thoughts? Obviously, like we kind of read through a few facts there, but she was very much, even like with her look, with the what you would say now is Mojo Rawley did it, didn't he? He painted his face in kind of tribute to her, with that lightning across the face, and the hair was always kind of like a Mohican style or faux hawk. Any thoughts on her going in?
Well, I don't know a huge amount about her. I know when people talk about women's wrestling in Japan, she's a big name people talk about. I can't say I've ever sat through in modern times, sat through a match on the network or anything like that. I was aware of her in WCW more than WWF. But I suppose WWE is WCW and WWF together, isn't it? I suppose. So, because because some people sometimes go, "Oh, it's a WCW person. Why are they in the WWE Hall of Fame?" It's because the WWE is WCW now. You fools. That is why. So she was a big deal in both companies, but for a short period of time, she was there, and I think All Japan fans will know her more. So I think there'll be a lot of Western wrestling fans who maybe haven't paid much attention to Japanese wrestling or women's wrestling, or maybe they're quite young and they might not have a clue who she is. But the Mojo Rawley thing, see, I didn't even twig the Mojo Rawley thing until after he had been released, and it was mentioned in some throwaway article, and I was like, oh my god, so it is. That's exactly what it is, So for that reason alone, I think people should check her out. That the fact that wrestlers today are still paying tribute to her in small ways, but important ways like that. But me personally, I don't know a huge amount about her. She was just one of the guys back in the day, I suppose, for me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing and learning a little bit more about her, I suppose.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. But someone who I guess probably really doesn't need any introduction. He's been known by a lot of different names, and if you want to know a little bit more about the background of Mr. Paul Heyman, I did an article for WrestleSphere, a sort of like a long form feature where you can learn a little bit more about Paul Heyman and like where he came from and how he got to prominence and sort of my thoughts, I guess, on someone who I believe is a massive name and a legend, and is at the moment certainly the sort of main event of the Hall of Fame, like the headliner of this year. Now, obviously, there's a reason for that as well. This year we are in Philadelphia, which is synonymous with ECW and therefore Paul Heyman himself as well. So I guess out of everyone, he's probably the most well-known. In fact, I say probably. I know Muhammad Ali, in the sort of general sense, is more well-known around the world. Yeah. Paul Heyman, inside the wrestling industry, is one of the most influential and well-known people as well. So this, to me, is fantastic, well-deserved. Apparently, he had been asked a few times to go in, wasn't keen on doing it while he was very much in the sort of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say middle, but, like the highlight of his career at the moment. And he also kind of like, I think he turned Vince down for a few reasons, but was apparently persuaded because he was quite touched that Triple H wanted him as part of his first solo Hall of Fame organization.
Is that what it is?
Apparently so. That's what the sort of bigger names in the wrestling journalism industry are saying, is he was quite touched by being asked to headline this particular one. And of course, there's that Philadelphia connection as well. So the stars just seem to have aligned very well. I'm going to let you kick this one off. Paul Heyman. What else can you say?
Yeah, geez. Dan has shared the WrestleSphere article. I thought he might. I'm glad you're here, Dan. Thank you for that. But that's the one he was talking about right there. Go have a little look at it. Blimey. I knew about him, Paul Heyman, when, from talking to people about like some of the, when he was Paulie Dangerously, and he was a bit of a bad guy in some of the territories, and then he became a promoter himself. He was one of the last holdouts. You can't really consider ECW a territory. It wasn't. It was the third company during the Monday Night Wars. A lot of people liked it. It was the one the edgy lad in the playground liked. He was like, "Oh, you're watching WCW, WWF. Oh, you're both pathetic. Ouch, ECW." It was the edgelords promotion back then. And I'm not a massive fan of hardcore wrestling, so I was never a big ECW guy back then. I love WWF and I love WCW. But I knew but I followed it. I knew what was going on. And when it folded and when it became part of WWE along with WCW, the invasion, it became undeniable and unignorable when it was the ridiculous invasion angle of 2000 and Andy's sighing. So that says it all, doesn't it, about the invasion angle?
I don't know. I'm kind of sighing because I think I never really took that much attention to WCW. I was always loyal to WWE. It's part of the reason why I can hold Sting in great esteem, but I don't know his full background in terms of like the WCW run. And he's one of those guys. I used to have a friend who was very much WCW, was very excited to tell me about everything that's going on. I had no interest in watching it because of people like Bill Goldberg, where I just didn't understand the kind of like spear, jackhammer, done.
Loved it.
That sort of stuff kind of like put me off a bit, and I was like, no, give me the Attitude Era, give me ruthless aggression, etc. So for me, I was actually intrigued because I didn't know that much about ECW. I didn't know that much about WCW. So I was like, oh, who's this? Not knowing actually like Chuck Palumbo was actually no one, and there's no reason to get excited for him. And then it did start to twig where I was like, well, where is Sting? And where is, and Goldberg and Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, and Kevin Nash. For me, as someone who didn't know, I don't hate it. It could have been so much more. I think that's the problem that it'll always go down with. But the ECW stuff, a lot of those guys were like, "Hey, this is a decent payday for me." So a lot of the ECW guys were happy to come across and do that. So sorry, I interrupt you mid-flow.
No, it's okay. No, this is a back and forth. It's a discussion. But it warmed my cockles a little bit to, like you say, to see some of those guys get that payday and come over there. Like when the invasion happened, I was more thinking, obviously, like you needed the Stings, the Goldbergs, the NWOs, and the Ric Flairs for that to have, and in a parallel world, they would have bought out everyone's contracts, and we would have had some of the greatest feuds ever. But anyway, one of the big gets for WWE, or the newly created WWE, this amalgamation of the three companies that had been fighting before that, was Paul Heyman eventually coming into the fold alongside Vince, somebody who had been a rival to him for so long. And the two of them actually we don't know what they're like with each other backstage, but they've worked together for so long that you've got to think things were all right and that they got on. And at the end of the day, I think Vince, I know he's persona non grata at the moment, but probably forever, but would have recognized in Paul Heyman what we all see, which is this guy is a creative genius. He's fantastic on the mic. He's a very good booker. People forget that as well. Like, remember when they put him in charge of Raw for a while and it just instantly improved overnight?
Well, SmackDown was where he really kind of got his teeth in and was able to kind of steer that, because he wasn't given any of the kind of like, had a couple of the stars, but then he was the one who's really influential in getting Rey Mysterio and Kurt Angle and that kind of like ilk of bringing them up to the main event. So he was the one who really pushed SmackDown into, being. And there's a fantastic documentary on the network, or you'll probably be able to find it on Peacock as well if you're watching America, where it explains Paul Heyman's background, who he is, and like as you said, his relationship with Vince actually started when he was in ECW. And Vince was very much a case of like, actually, I see something in this guy, I want to help him out. Like, Vince obviously knew ECW were never going to be on a level with WCW and WWE, so they never saw him, I guess, as that sort of bigger threat. But he was like, actually, could we turn ECW into a little bit of a sort of like training zone, and then we pinch their talent and stuff like that? And there was things where like Vince would push him and say like, you should do this or try this, or like, well done for that sort of thing. So it wasn't a surprise to that many people in WWE when he came across, but I think it sucked for people in ECW that they felt at that time he'd sold out a bit. But I thought it was really cool. About you, my first massive introduction to him in WWE was when he sat next to JR, because the King had gone with the cat. When the cat was let go from the company, King showed his loyalty because they were married at the time and left with him. So in stepped Paul Heyman, this proper brash, like smart-mouthed heel commentator coming in, who was, King was a great heel, but he was more of a sort of he's a bit playful and like you don't really take him that seriously.
Yeah.
He came in and you were like, JR seemed to absolutely hate him. He was this proper like slime ball that JR was like, I don't want to work with you. And I thought that was such a great team on commentary.
But he's such a movie villain, isn't he, Paul Heyman? He's such an obvious and King's a cartoon character, but so is Heyman, but in a different kind of way. Heyman is that smarmy lawyer character almost that you just want to get beaten up or something like that. And like when he uses the word advocate, he leans into that as well a little bit. I often thought like he knows exactly what to say and what to do. One of my favourite Paul Heyman moments is a moment a lot of people don't know. And it's a shame what's happened to the brand since WWE bought it, because no one's seen it bloody since. But there was a very special episode of Evolve a few years ago where there was a feud going on between the Undisputed Era and some of the characters from Evolve, some of the wrestlers there. And one of the heels came to the ring to cut a promo and slag someone off. And the minute they got the mic, they choked on their words and they went, and they coughed a few times like that. And it was only when the lights went out, you thought, oh, he's doing the Heyman entrance. And then when the lights came back on, Heyman stood in the ring on this episode of Evolve and cuts a really good promo, puts over Evolve, puts over some of the talent who went on to become big stars. Some of them are currently not with the company, but could head back one day, like Matt Riddle. Austin Theory was one of them. Darby Allin over in AEW is another. But I think the thing that I love Heyman for the most is when I had obviously it's this run with Roman Reigns is as you say, his greatest work. This is his magnum opus. This is just everything. But and if it wasn't for Heyman, by the way, being involved in this, would it be so good? Because I don't think it would be. It'd still be good, but it wouldn't be anywhere near the level it is. But the thing I thank him for as a fan would be when I had some time away from wrestling and came back to it. I came back to something that was actually quite important to me. And some people will dismiss this because everyone calls him Oldberg now and stuff like that. But when Goldberg came back to the company, it had his run with the Universal Championship and that feud with Brock Lesnar. And the story was always Brock's got an insecurity around Goldberg because he's always the one guy he's just not been able to put away, and it's always been like an itch that he's not been able to scratch. I thought that was a great story. Now, Brock and Goldberg aren't the greatest promos. They never have been. But Heyman almost single-handedly told that story. I think, it was WrestleMania 32 where it actually blew off. Wasn't a brilliant match. It was just a couple of minutes of Brock and Goldberg smashing each other around and doing their big moves on each other, which is all it needed to be. But Heyman really sold it. He was the one who he'd get in the ring with Goldberg and he talked to him about his career and things like that. They made it a little bit WWE versus WCW again. They did all of this, and that sucked me back in. And I was moving house at the time, and I got here into this pad. WrestleMania was happening a couple of days later. I'm sat around surrounded in boxes, and I watched that episode of Raw where Heyman is like, is going over what happened at Mania that day. And I remember just thinking to myself, God, I've slept on this guy. I've taken this guy for granted for so long. This guy is bloody brilliant. And I knew he was good, but he was just another face in the crowd. And it was only that moment where I thought, like, he kind of got me back into wrestling. He got me passionate about it again. And I think that's who Heyman is. It's almost like Barry Heenan and people like that could do that sort of thing, but not many.
Yeah, and there are like Brian Heenan and Bobby Heenan and Paul Bearer are names that come up frequently in terms of like best managers. To me, I think maybe because the 80s was a bit too old, and when I look back, I can appreciate how good they actually are when I go back and do research. But to me, living in the here and now, Paul Heyman is by far and away the best manager that I've ever seen in wrestling, because you look at the names he's had to represent. There's a reason why he's paired with Brock Lesnar. There's a reason why he's paired with Roman Reigns. Now, I say in the article that I wrote for WrestleSphere, when you look back, some of the criticism that Roman Reigns had was because he came out of the Shield and then they tried to put a microphone in his hand and get him to do a normal wrestling promo. Whereas in the Shield, he was the muscle. He would say the odd one or two things. People thought he was kind of like the cool guy at the back, a bit of a silent type. Putting him in that position to speak was never going to work very well. And he had to I guess he had to go through it to a degree. But then I still remember watching that bit back when it was the Thunderdome era. of going backstage when Roman came back after being away, because obviously he has, the compromised immune system, etc. He came back in, and when the camera cut and slowly went from Adam Pearce to Roman Reigns, and then he looked across his shoulder and Paul Heyman sat next to him, genuinely confused, going like, hold on, Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman. And then as it's gone on, you go, they've made Roman Reigns be able to cut very short promos. If you listen to it, and he's got better. He has his cadence has got better. He uses his acknowledge me side of things very well. But when it comes to developing a story, all he's got to do is say, wise man talk to them. Or Brock Lesnar had to say something stupid, Paul. And that side of things, and he will tell the story. He will sell you a ticket. He will sell you the pay-per-view. He was the reason why you'd want to see the match, because he can paint that kind of promotion, that rivalry, like no one else can. And I don't think I've ever been as invested in a manager as I have with Paul Heyman. And I'm intrigued to see who it is that they pick to induct him, who he wants to induct him, because there's a long list of names as to, it could be this person, it could be this person, and there's a reason why it can't be that person as well. So, I'm
just get RVD really, really stoned and let him do it. That'd be brilliant. Let's just do that.
Let me know in the comments, who do you think is going to be inducting Paul Heyman? Because people might say, I don't know, the one that I keep hearing is Tommy Dreamer. Now, Tommy Dreamer, not too long ago, told everyone he was in such a bad mental state that at WrestleMania 17, he had a plan to take a gun, shoot Paul Heyman, and shoot himself live on air. That was how he was going to be at WrestleMania 17. I'd be surprised if there's enough water under the bridge and someone's willing to say that in an interview to for them to induct that person. So I don't think it could be Tommy Dreamer. Do you get someone like Bubba Ray or the Dudleys in general? So, you could get someone like the Dudleys in. Bubba Ray has a talk show, a podcast. He's a good talker. I'm sure he could do a very good job for Paul Heyman. But, I don't know. For me, you want someone who's just going to absolutely sell the crap out of why Paul Heyman is this absolute amazing person and manager, and has done everything he possibly can do. So Mark's put a suggestion in there. It could be Punk. They could get CM Punk.
I think it should be Punk. I think it Dudley's is a great shout. It's not going to be Dreamer. There's not a sniff. But blimey, if it is. I mean, but Punk, for me, is one of the only guys who can talk like Heyman. He's got the moves like Jagger. He's got the mic like Heyman. So, and with him being someone Heyman used to manage, I love that. Dan's asked, could you get CM Punk to induct him? There's no bad blood between them, is there? Or is there?
Not that I know of. If you go back to that documentary that I watched, and actually they spent a little bit of time where Paul Heyman was sent back when he was rubbing people up the wrong way in WWE in his original run, and he left for a little while and created his own PR company and media agency. But before that, he was actually sent to FCW, which obviously with them, they'd kind of evolve into NXT. But back in FCW, that's where Punk was. And that was where Punk became very much a Heyman guy. And in terms of anyone who, with a microphone in their hand, could, put someone over to the best of their ability, CM Punk absolutely could. But do you get someone like CM Punk in to cover the latter half of his career and then get someone like the Dudleys or Bubba Ray or someone like that to cover the ECW days and have it sort of split? Because I think with Stacey Keebler last year, they got Mick Foley and Tori Wilson, and they kind of covered off different sections of her career.
Oh yeah, God, I was so tired during that. I was dying. I was like, oh, look. And here's the thing: if I are you going to be in the room this time for this?
I will be there. Yeah.
Good, right, excellent. Because last year, I tell you what, if I was in the room for Heyman talking at the end of this, no disrespect to Rey Mysterio, I love Rey Mysterio. I think I think he's an all right promo, but the only person in the world who probably could have kept me awake at that point would have been Paul Heyman. So
Conan did a good job. of
he's another one I can listen to all day. Absolutely amazing. Yeah,
because it just feels like a bit of a loose cannon. But yeah, again, a lot of intrigue as to who might be the person who gets the honour of putting Paul Heyman in. I did ask the guys from Grimmy Hill, to give me a couple of best moments for Paul Heyman. Now, Dan kind of suggested the one, where he's like a day takes off the air. There's a whole history behind where this promo came from, but this is Paul Heyman, loose cannon, didn't give a crap. He would literally just kind of like, he went into business for ECW and he wanted ECW to be the absolute best it was. And he wanted that TV deal that, eventually they never had because at the time they switched and went with WWE instead of ECW. And that kind of like created a bit of bad blood for him and the company. And it eventually was, I guess, the death nail in the coffin for ECW was not having that TV one. So another one that Mark's mentioned there, the one where he rips Vince apart, where he literally just says, "I hate you," and he goes on about how he did one thing his dad promised everyone he wouldn't do, and he kind of he pinched everyone and everything, and then went national instead of keeping it in the territories. But that whole speech, go watch it on YouTube. It's fantastic. It's literally just Paul Heyman absolutely ripping Vince a new one for a good 5-10 minutes in only the way that Paul Heyman possibly can do. And this one just, again, it's one of the moments I mentioned in the WrestleSphere feature. I can't put this moment and Paul Heyman over enough. It didn't matter whether Brock Lesnar beat Undertaker if Paul Heyman wasn't there, because he legitimized it. To me, when I want to watch something back, I can go back to WrestleMania 30. Please go watch it, because I love the lack of noise when the referee's hand hits 3. Michael Cole says that the streak is over, but silence. You see Paul Heyman dive into the ring and pull this face. And this face, in that moment, Paul Heyman was every single one of us that could not believe what we had just seen. For the life of me, thought there's been a mistake. Like, this isn't real. Like, they'll get out of it somehow. And
then we saw the screen.
Yeah. And then it's like you hear this like gasp when you can't see it, because I think at the time you're seeing a picture of Brock and Taker and Paul, but the rest of the arena has just seen the 21-1 flash up on the screen. And like everyone is just like kind of like, you hear this like gasps and screams. It's such a good moment in wrestling history, and like I just can't put it over enough. Just go back and watch it, just the end, just to like see and hear people's reactions. And as I said in that, and I'll say it again, in that moment, Paul Heyman represented every single wrestling fan who just could not believe what they've seen. And this is one of my favorite shots in wrestling, because it just sums up that.
Mark saying, people think that the ref messed it up. Like, of course they bloody did. Like, anyone who believes that is off their head. Like, Heyman rehearsed the ever-loving crap out of that. Like, don't think he didn't. Heyman knew this was happening, and he knew exactly that face would be the face we were all feeling internally. And he knew exactly what to do in that moment, and that is why we remember it, because the guy is a pro. Like, could he have done that off the cuff? Yeah, probably. But no, Heyman was waiting for that memeable moment right there.
Well, if you watch, he did an interview, like a tour with, I think it's Kenny from Inside the Ropes, where he talks about it. And he's a very sort of like Heyman-esque promo that he when he does this story with Kenny and I think it might be in Glasgow that he did it. But when he's talking about it, he says, like there is always conspiracy theories as to like people, whether the ref did mess up, etc. But he then says like, like go back and watch it, and there's only a handful of people who knew. There was Brock, there was me, there was the referee, and there was the Undertaker and Vince. And like very, very few people knew about it. So like, but he says like, or did Brock go and do what he had to do? And then he kind of ends it like that, and just very teasing Paul Heyman like style. But yeah, there's no way like that moment the referee would know like, what to do, etc. So I just think it was exceptionally well played out. And to this day, it's one of those moments where you would put it as one of the most shocking moments in WWE history, especially WrestleMania history.
Like they had the Tron ready to go. You know what I mean? And they like Taker. You really like if that was a mistake, you really think Taker would have gone for it? Nah, mate, nah. That was deliberate. They knew exactly what they were doing. And like there is an argument because some people argue it would have been good for Taker to give his streak to somebody like Bray Wyatt. You know, the spooky heir apparent or something like that, and to put over a new star. But and that's all true, that's all right, and it's a perfectly valid opinion. But at the same time, Brock Lesnar for the next few years after that catapulted to absolute superstardom. After that,
yeah.
he was all right. He was a big star before, but it was only after that he became what he became for a while. And there's also another thing about it as well, which I've often thought, which is how I defend it, which is who the hell else, from a believable point of view, the idea that, oh, Brock did it because of course he did, because it's Brock, because of course he did. And and when you say it like that, when you think about it that way, and it becomes that obvious, it becomes genius. Like, could they put over some? Like, they did the whole thing with Roman Reigns and Taker at Mania. That was the moment where Taker was trying to create somebody for all it's worth. That was, but no, I still think that the argument as to why they chose Brock for that, I do see it. I don't necessarily think it was the right course of action, but I don't think it wasn't either. It's a very weird one. It could have. There's a parallel universe where they were with others.
Yeah, well, they doubled down as well because there's a scene if it goes around occasionally on YouTube or social media as well where he said they were having a discussion with Stone Cold that John Cena and Brock Lesnar were having their rivalry after the Undertaker match, and originally it was booked as a very 50-50 match.
Yeah,
where Cena, would still get his licks in and be John Cena, but then you saw. John Cena and Stone Cold were like, we can't do that. You've just beaten the Undertaker. Like, we need to cement that. We need to show why that's such a big deal. And if we go 50-50, it kind of diminishes Taker. So in that moment, they also went, no, you've got to absolutely destroy John Cena. And then they did that. And as you say, like, he went on to kind of cement his legacy. And with Brock in mind, I'm very interested to see how they're going to go about this because Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar are synonymous. And at the moment, Brock Lesnar is not talked about in WWE. They've gone, they haven't deleted him by any means, but they've certainly went to the extent of not mentioning him. He's not anywhere to be seen for WrestleMania. And I know there was some rumors that he was re-added onto the roster page. I don't think he was ever actually taken off. I think that was like the point. So I think people were just seeing what they want to see. Stuff like MJF on the AEW one, he was removed very quickly after his match. So I think people just seem to clickbait people into thinking, oh, this is happening. But for me, I'm genuinely curious as to how they're going to speak about Paul Heyman without mentioning that massive section of his career where he was the advocate for the beast. So how are they going to get around that if they do? So yeah, very, very interested to see how Brock Lesnar features in this because a bit of a disservice if they don't talk about that because I think it's the best part of a decade, if not more, with Brock Lesnar by his side or vice versa. So yeah, really, I think there's a lot of people going to be paying attention to that part of the Paul Heyman stuff and how they get around it. If not, we are going to finish off tonight by speaking about Bray Wyatt. We've mentioned at the top. There's still rumors going around that they might induct Bray Wyatt into the 2024 class. There's been news, depending on which outlets you believe, he was originally supposed to be in this year and was removed for a reason that hasn't come to light. I tend to think with the big documentary that's coming out on April 1st, there could be an announcement that night on WWE's Raw, especially as I believe The Rock is there. It's going to be the last Raw before WrestleMania. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that they do induct Bray Wyatt. And for me, I think it would be very apropos because with his dad and his uncle going in, I think they can make this a big celebration for that family. I think it's not raw enough to be exploitative, but I also think it's the right time for people to go, because I would hate to think WWE would take advantage of something like years down the line, people still going like, we want Bray, because there's a lot of social media like stuff happens around this time of year with Hall of Fame where people are begging for that sort of thing, and I think WWE should just head that off, and I think they should put him in now because one, he deserves it, quite frankly. Two, people want to celebrate him and they want to celebrate him now, and it doesn't mean his legacy won't be remembered for a long time, but for me, I think it's the right time for his family. You'll be able to give them a little bit more closure in the sense of like, hopefully seeing that outpouring of love like hasn't diminished since he left us. Right. So to me, I think it's the right time. What about yourself, Sam? Do you want to see Bray Wyatt go in this year, or do you think you should hold off and show it in the future?
I'd like him to go in this year because it would be a way to, as you say, closure. And I never thought of it that way. And it would give us that. It would, and we can then like we can all move on and thanks for the memories, Bray. Yes, but but part of me, I actually didn't think WWE would actually be exploitative in any way. This is just an assumption. I haven't heard anything. I just assumed that they weren't putting him in this year because they already had the roster set up and a lot of moving parts had gone into making that. So I just assumed they were holding him back to give him an even bigger showing maybe next year. That's what I took away from it. But I tell you what, if they reveal it at the end of that documentary and he goes in this year, brilliant, awesome. But I have faith that they're going to do it right, whatever they do. Being he going in this year or not going in this year, either way, I do trust them to get it right, particularly with Triple H steering the ship. I do trust them to get it right. To be fair, I wouldn't even. I know he had a rocky relationship with Vince, so I feel a bit better that I think Triple H will know what to do, which is often the case, I find.
I have no doubts. I even think when the stuff with Vince was at times Vince wanted a bit more control over a character that was very close to Wyndham's heart, and maybe that was where they kind of like differed because we saw a lot of merchandise come out about Bray Wyatt, which maybe didn't really fit, especially the Fiend. It didn't really fit the persona that he was kind of painting, and a bit regretfully, I don't think we would have wanted to see I didn't want to see as much merch as they did bring out, but good for the fans if they managed to get that from it. But as Mark says, there's still people saying that they want China in.
She should.
There's a lot of reasons why I guess China hasn't gone in. The rumors have always been, if people then started to Google her, then they might get some things that they don't really want kids to see, etc. But hey, they put people in who have been in Playboy. I know it's slightly different, but like to me, WWE used to advertise very freely these women who went into Playboy. Like they made a whole thing about Eddie Guerrero and China being like at odds because she went into Playboy, etc. I then find it a little bit.
Well, Gangrel's in there for God's sake. He did something very similar. And so
in there, 2 or 3 times? He was in the same video in one of the videos.
Well, there we go. So I mean, at this point, in this more enlightened and dare I say, in the OnlyFans era, those taboos aren't what they used to be. If you don't want your kids Googling stuff like that, parents, then maybe give them a
obviously, there's going to be a bit of a sour taste in the way that the relationship ended, by the sounds of it, between Triple H and China as well, and that side of things. But I would have thought that would make it, more so that Triple H would want to honour her. So I wouldn't be surprised to see her going in the future. She certainly deserves it. Again, another absolute pioneer of the women's division, and even back in the day, it was so believable to see her wrestling the likes of Chris Jericho or Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero and hold her own. It was never any issue with that. But Mark's saying it's China's family, whoever runs her accounts, that's doing it. Yeah, it is a bit of a strange one because I think there's still a lot of rawness about that one. I think there was never any closure for Joni on that side of things. So, and that's a shame. And there's no kind of coming back from that side of the issues with her going in. But you'd love to see her honoured. She obviously did go in with DX when DX went in as well as part of that, but she certainly deserves her own way in there. Let me know in the comments, is there anyone else you straight away think that person has to be in the Hall of Fame? They're not in there yet. Sam's going to let me know in a second who his major one that he'd like to see go in. Miplet 2002, is it the 25th in the UK yet? Very specific question. Nice to have you in, but no, it's 10 11.
It's Michael from the that's Michael's new account from the from Gimme a Hole, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
He's one of our regulars.
You keep me updated, but no, it's 11 minutes past 10 in the UK at the moment, so we're not at midnight. We're doing a nice early one, and we're going to head off in the next few minutes. So let us know in the comments before we leave and go to bed ourselves, so Sam can make sure that he rests that dulcet tones of his and get better for what I'm sure is a busy work week as well. Sam did promise you a chance. Who would you like to see go into the Hall of Fame who's not already there?
And look, I'm going to change the question, if you don't mind, because you've already said my two. We've already said my two, which is China and Bray Wyatt. So I'm going to answer a question with a question. Now, what about Jim Cornette?
What about him?
Well, I mean, like, I don't. Sometimes I think he's someone who should be in there, and you know, and then other times, obviously, there are some issues there as well. He's one of the ones that people debate relentlessly, and the problem is, you probably not get him on a plane either. You'd have to drive. You'd have to flipping do it in Kentucky. In order to even get him anywhere near. So, but that's often the one that I see people debating a lot. So I thought it might be a good one to raise. I'm not expressing a view either way on that. I just thought it's one to leave people pondering.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at it from the sense of who's already in there. And, you know, when you see the Dudleys in, you see Edge in, Christian will one day go in. And the Hardys have to go in as well. But obviously, at the moment, they've got a very hot rivalry, whatever you want to kind of call it. There is animosity between the two companies. But, you know, I still think you should be allowed to honor people who have kind of served the company very well. And, you know, and again, someone who isn't really talked about at the moment because of potential transgressions, Chris Jericho is probably going to be a Hall of Famer at some point. He's had a Hall of Fame career, that's for damn sure. As I say, for me, the Hardys. The Rock will be inducted one day. It's just a case of where and when. He's a huge name that's not gone in when you look at the counterparts. Triple H himself has to go in as an individual, not as part of anything else. But as an individual, he has to go in. I'd argue you still got the likes of Stephanie McMahon should go in. She played a huge part back in the 90s. But it obviously gets a little bit messy in the sense of like, yeah, but they're higher up, they're on the board, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Norma comes in with an absolute shout there. Bam Bam Bigelow is way overdue. First wide body big man to do something besides plod around the ring and pummel his opponent. He did some like great aerial moves back in the day, like sort of moonsaults, etc. So very, very interesting to see if Bam Bam will ever go in. And again, he's a guy who a lot of people reference when they say, like, especially the bigger guys, their influences of getting into wrestling, of seeing Bam Bam Bigelow and his tattooed head and interesting attire with the flames, etc. So interesting to see if Bam Bam will ever go in.
Also, What Mark's saying that AEW and TNA, for the record, as well, both they have a policy where they're all right with people on their active roster going into the WWE Hall of Fame. For starters, it's just professional courtesy. And secondly, it actually benefits them as well.
But if that's true, I don't fully understand why AEW didn't reach out to WWE about getting some Sting stuff, which apparently they just didn't reach out.
Like, I think it's a weird one. I don't know the answer. I know they're all right with them doing Hall of Fame stuff, people going to the Hall of Fame, but I don't know if they're at the level where they can talk to each other and do tape sharing quite like. So, for example, WWE and TNA do a lot of tape sharing with each other, and have often like got on with that. And TNA and AEW often do it at the moment as well. But I feel like it right now it is for all the talk of the Forbidden Door. I feel like AEW. I don't think they want to go and reach out to WWE for a favor, but they're happy to, in the background, not get in the way of people doing what they want to do as well. So I think that's where we are. I don't think it's a case of the channels of communication are open. It's just AEW isn't being a barrier to its staff. I think it's just that.
Yeah. Eric Bischoff's in Norma. He went in 2021. So Eric Bischoff's already there. Again, another person who I believe is very warranted to go in, not just for his work as a general manager, etc. in WWE, but the way that they pushed each other during the Monday Night Wars. He definitely should have gone in. So there's another one. I'm sure he will. Like Dustin Rhodes, Goldust, I'm sure will go in at some point. But again, it's probably just a timing thing as to tying up his commitments. And I'm sure he's retiring this year, isn't he?
Well, he's also been talking. They've been talking about him a little bit on WWE TV as well.
It's been like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like like that.
It's also a case of he's somebody who, like Cody, has got a very important history with both companies. So, and the fact is, his career, you've got to just put that wrestler first sometimes, and get out of your own way. The war, the rivalry can carry on, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Wrestling is always better when there's 2 or 3 big companies doing their thing. It's always better for it. And it doesn't mean they have to hate one another, and there doesn't need to be silly tribalism. And like I've also never understood the loyalty thing, because you can be loyal to all of them. You just can. But it's like with someone like Dustin, if I was Dustin, I'd be like, right, show me the man who's got the balls to get in the way, either way, of what I want to do with both companies. Because I don't think that person exists. I really don't. I think Dustin can do what he wants.
Yeah.
I don't think AEW or WWE would be dickish enough to stop him from doing that. Respect exists. I think Dustin's got it.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like James has put there that AEW got turned down a few times for other clips. They just didn't bother with Sting.
I'd need a source though for that. I think.
Yeah, it's one of those we don't 100% know the truth behind that sort of stuff. Like, it's very easy to go. We could do it on WrestleSphere. We could easily just go on and put an article saying like, "Oh, actually, Sting personally reached out to Triple H and was turned down." But like, there's no like credible source. We're not doing that from a point of anything but wanting traffic. We wouldn't do it. We won't ever do it.
Nope.
And you have both.
For starters, I'd sub-edit the crap out of that.
Yeah.
I'd be all over that like a fly on you.
But that's how easy it is. It doesn't have to be anyone from any kind of like actual source. And which is like, if you see something on WrestleSphere, it's because we have verified it, or it's been kind of like confirmed by people within the company. So you'll never see.
We'll show you and tell you who usually as well.
Yeah, if we're allowed to, but I don't see why we wouldn't be. But that's the WWE Hall of Fame 2024. Plenty of people still to go in, which I'm sure will be great, because we'll be back again next year talking about the class of 2025. Still talking about probably the fact that China or Bam Bam Bigelow is not in there yet. Hopefully not. It'd be great to see them in. But this year, there's some great names going in. I'd implore you, if you don't know anything about them, this is the perfect reason and opportunity to go back and watch some stuff, whether it be on Peacock, YouTube, the network, wherever you kind of watch it. But you can see this. This is on after SmackDown. I believe in the UK, you'll be able to watch the Hall of Fame on the network. So definitely make sure that you're checking out the Hall of Fame this year. I think Paul Heyman's speech is probably going to be one of the all-timers. I'm certainly looking forward to it and hoping it keeps me awake at the end of what promised to be a long day, because I'm going to a couple of indie shows before it, and I need to be kept awake. Planned for for next week, I think Sam is away next Friday, so we'll see what we can do. Maybe we'll move some stuff around, but I'm planning, because I will be away the week after. I'll be in Philadelphia, and I'll be at SmackDown, etc. I think next week we're going to be doing our WrestleMania preview. I need to go back and check the spreadsheet that me and Sam did when we booked our WrestleMania 6 months out.
Yeah.
Go back and watch that, see how close we were. I don't think we were very close, maybe on a couple.
You think a few things are out of our control, like Seth Rollins and CM Punk and stuff like that. So
that's true. That is true. Yeah, disclaimer: we can't be held responsible for injuries and that changing plans, and we'll never know.
We caused the injury, unless we push CM Punk down the stairs or something horrible like that. But
I do have a picture of your face on Drew McIntyre's body. That's obviously you were involved in CM Punk's. But that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, join us next week.
True.
We're
compromised. Abort.
You are not DM Hunk, but you are Mr. Sam Smith. It's been a pleasure discussing Hall of Fame. Your voice seems to have managed to hold out until the end here. But yes, we will be going through our WrestleMania and potential NXT Stand and Deliver preview show next week. Yeah. I might move things around so Sam can be involved. We might do things a little bit earlier or something, because it's going to be an interesting one to have a chat about. We might have a little bit more of an idea if there's any more matches to be added before we do it. If not, we'll speculate anyway. But thank you very much for joining us. This has been the WWE Hall of Fame 2024 Sunday social discussion. And we just want to say thank you very much for joining us. If you're watching this in the future, I hope you've learned something today. But let us know in the comments if you're excited to see any of these people in particular go in, or if there's anyone, as we said at the end, that you'd like to see go in. But as for tonight, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've had a lovely weekend. He's been Sam. I've been Andy. This has been Wrestling Royalty.